Today we will discuss DC profiles. In this episode we will discuss Guap from 37th. Guap, also known as Pedro. Hank or Black is a 37th affiliate and rapper who has been around since back in the day and even went to school with other 37th members like Young Jose and Swipey. Guap can be seen in this old Young Jose video with a lot of 37th members before they hopped in them cars. You can see members as kids such as 3 Osama, Young Threat, Double O, and even a Young SD, who I did a DC profiles on in the past. Guap raps about spinning Choppa City a lot in music, and also spinning the cruddy a lot. In jail, Guap would run into cruddy rappers' sneaky bands, and they would start throwing them hands. The streets would say, Guap got the best of Sneaky in the brawl and came out with a victory. Guap also allegedly had his chain snatched, and rappers also talk about this situation a lot. Rapper Fat Pockets from the Cruddy says in new song, I ain't nothing like Guap, you ain't taking this chain. Then he follows up with Threat talking about shit he ain't. Do he a bitch? Caught 4 on that hill. Blame me for the shit. Guap would also be dissed by KP Skywalker. KP says in a song he be bipping on thoughts and sipping on walk. He then follows up with, ain't no way I'm going out sad like Guap. The situation they are speaking on is allegedly a rapper from Virginia got bagged by 37th for the Big Sco chain. And Guap or Young Threat would later get bagged for the chain Up the V and cause 37th to have alias bump with CHV. Now we will get into the arrest of Guap. Guap was up 37th in a free car when officers noticed and gave chase. That's when Guap would be caught in a similar way to his fellow 37th member Baby Jamo. Guap would be caught with a blat and a legal registered handgun. On December 13, 2023, members of the Metropolitan Police Department's Atlas team were patrolling Washington, D.C.'s 6th Police District. Members were dressed in full uniform and utilizing marked and unmarked police vehicles. At approximately 0140 hours, members entered the 200 block of 37th Place SE, which is known to officers as a neighborhood plagued by violent crime and stolen vehicles. Officer Hill, driver, and Sergeant Jones, FPS, were driving a marked vehicle up the hill of 37th Place, followed by Officer E. Porter, driver, Investigator Brown, FPS, and Officer Villaverde, RPS, in an unmarked police vehicle when they observed a black-in-color Infiniti parked in the block. As the members continued up the hill, they observed the Infiniti spontaneously pull away from the curb and begin driving down the hill towards the members at a very high rate of speed. Officer Porter quickly steered away from the Infiniti towards the opposite curb in an attempt to avoid being struck head-on, and came to a complete stop in the roadway. The Infiniti initially was approaching the members in the unmarked vehicle at a high rate of speed before rapidly steering the vehicle to the right to avoid a collision. This maneuver appeared to cause the Infiniti to lose control and collide into 2 parked vehicles. One of the vehicles was a black-in-color Mercedes-Benz, which was pushed up onto the sidewalk, causing severe damage to the driver's side. The other was a white-in-color Toyota sedan with damage to the rear. The Infiniti appeared to be extremely damaged and completely disabled. The driver of the Infiniti swiftly opened the door and fled on foot. Officer Porter, Villaverde, and Investigator Brown exited their unmarked vehicle and pursued the driver on foot. Investigator Brown got a very brief look at the driver and yelled, "Police! Stop running!" As Officers Porter and Villaverde continued their foot pursuit of the driver into the grassy area between the rows of homes, Investigator Brown observed a marked police vehicle containing Officers Leagy, driver, B. Porter, FPS, and Livesey, RPS, enter the block. Investigator Brown directed the officers to turn around and point towards the direction the driver of the Infiniti was running. Officers from the vehicle asked for a lookout of the driver, to which Investigator Brown responded with, black male, heavy set, black bubble coat, black jeans, short bushy hair, approximately 5'7", medium complexion. Investigator Brown then stopped and discontinued his foot pursuit after noticing there was no officer standing with the Infiniti and subsequently went back to secure it. As Investigator Brown got back to the Infiniti, he looked inside and observed what appeared to be a black in-color handgun in the floorboard area of the driver's seat. Investigator Brown voiced his observations with his MPD-issued radio, over channel MPD-4, to the other members of the team, and asked for additional units to come back for safety purposes. Moments later, Officer E. Porter voiced over the same channel that he had made an apprehension. Officer Porter advised Investigator Brown of the following events during the foot pursuit. Officer Porter pursued the driver of the Infinity through the grassy area and down a concrete staircase, through a breezeway, and down into a grassy area leading to another concrete staircase behind several row homes. Officer Porter observed the driver approach a rear entrance door to one of the homes and began to frantically push against it. The driver of the Infinity appeared to fail to gain entry through the doorway and once again took flight on foot towards the 3600 block of B Street SE. Officer Porter observed the driver of the Infinity run across the street and into the grassy area alongside the sidewalk. Officer Porter was able to catch up to the driver of the Infinity and take him down into the grassy area, then secure him in handcuffs and placed under arrest. The driver of the Infinity identified himself verbally as Tariq Lassiter. Officer B. Porter assisted in the search incident to arrest of defendant Lassiter and located an Infinity key fob inside his left cargo pants pocket. Officer B. Porter handed the key fob to Officer E. Porter. Officer Porter eventually responded back to the Infinity and engaged the buttons on the key fob, audibly triggering the lock-dart-unlock mechanism on the vehicle. Officers ran a query on the information of the Infinity in the Wales database, revealing that it was stolen out of Baltimore City, Maryland. VIN number J9CV6R5BM354660, OCA number 42311043008. The firearm inside the Infinity was recovered by Officer Coxaldi, who responded to the 6th District Station to have it processed by DFS. The firearm appeared to be a black-in-color Glock 22 .40-caliber semi-automatic handgun, equipped with what is known as a giggle switch, silver in color, located at the rear end of the slide above the receiver. The magazine was loaded with 15 rounds of ammunition with one inside the chamber of the gun. The magazine itself had a 22-round capacity. The firearm appeared to have a serial number of RDD017. It should be noted the listed firearm, upon inspection, appeared to be fully functional and operable, is intended to expel bullets by means of explosion, is capable of being fired with a single hand, and has a barrel length of less than 12 inches. A Wales query of the firearm revealed that it was not registered in the District of Columbia. Defendant Lassiter does possess a permit to carry a concealed firearm in the District of Columbia. A criminal history check was conducted of Defendant Lassiter, revealing a conviction of assault with a dangerous weapon and unlawful possession of a firearm on Aero 301-2018, docket number 2018 CF2-03475. Defendant Lassiter received sentences of 28 months and 12 months concurrently. Defendant Lassiter was arrested for felon in possession, unauthorized use of a vehicle, and leaving after colliding, possession of a large-capacity ammunition feeding device, National Firearms Act, possession of unregistered ammunition, and possession of an unregistered firearm. Defendant Lassiter was transported to the 6th District for processing. On the morning of December 13, 2023, at approximately 1:40 a.m., Metropolitan Police Department, MPD, patrol officers entered the 200 block of 37th Place SE, Washington, D.C., which is known to MPD officers as a neighborhood plagued by gun violence. While driving a marked vehicle up the hill of 37th Place SE, officers recognized a black Infinity parked in the block, which appeared consistent with a vehicle that had been stolen out of Baltimore City, Maryland, hereafter, the Infinity. As the officers continued up the hill, the Infinity spontaneously pulled away from the curb and drove down the hill at a high rate of speed towards the officers. To avoid a head-on collision, the officers quickly steered towards the opposite curb and away from the Infinity. The Infinity, too, suddenly veered away from the officer's vehicle, causing the Infinity to lose control and collide into two parked vehicles, which were resultantly damaged. The driver of the Infinity, later identified as Tariq Lassiter, i.e. the defendant, swiftly opened the door and fled on foot, leaving the driver's side door open. No other individuals exited the vehicle, nor had anyone aside from the driver occupied the Infinity immediately before its collision. Officers exited their vehicle and pursued the driver on foot while yelling, "Police! Stop running!" Meanwhile, an investigator looked inside the Infiniti that had collided and observed a black firearm in the floorboard area of the driver's seat, depicted below. Officers pursuing the driver were able to stop and apprehend him. The driver of the Infiniti verbally identified himself as Tariq Lassiter, hereinafter the defendant. In a search of the defendant's person incident to his arrest, officers recovered the Infiniti key fob inside his left cargo pants pocket. The key fob, when activated, audibly triggered the lock-unlock mechanism of the Infiniti, wherein the firearm in question was found. Officers querying the details of the Infiniti confirmed that it had in fact been stolen out of Baltimore City, Maryland. The firearm recovered from the driver's side of the Infiniti that the defendant had been operating was a black Glock 22, 40 caliber semi-automatic firearm bearing serial number RDD0117. The firearm was equipped with a conversion device rendering the handgun fully automatic, i.e., a machine gun. The extended magazine with a 22-round capacity was inserted into the handgun and loaded with 15 rounds of ammunition. One live round was inside the chamber of the gun, ready to be fired. The Bail Reform Act requires pre-trial detention where a court finds that no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required and the safety of any other person in the community. 18 U.S.C. 3142E F. In making that determination, a court must consider 1. The nature and circumstances of the offense charged. 2. The weight of the evidence against the person. 3. The history and characteristics of the person. And 4. The nature and seriousness of the danger to any person or the community that would be posed by the person's release. ed. Paragraph 3142 GG. The government retains the ultimate burden of persuasion by clear and convincing evidence that the defendant presents a danger to the community and by the lesser standard of a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant presents a risk of flight, even where it is presumed that those standards are satisfied. See United States v. Thomas, number 21 CR 724, 2022, WL 23083 at 2, DDC Jander 24, 2022, Cooper, J., citing United States v. Simpkins, 826 F2D 94. The second factor weight of the evidence similarly weighs strongly in favor of detention. The firearm in question was recovered on the floorboard area of the driver's seat of the Infiniti, which the defendant had solely occupied immediately before the firearm's recovery. Next to that firearm on the floorboard was a cell phone with the defendant's image on the phone's home screen, as depicted below. Moreover, notifications from one of the defendant's Instagram accounts, Hankroll 137th, populated the cell phone home screen, which is also visible in the below image of the phone. Any contention that the firearm was possessed by someone else is undermined by the fact that the defendant alone had occupied the Infiniti prior to its collision. What's more, the car keys to the Infiniti were recovered from the defendant's person incident to his arrest, and officers confirmed on body-worn camera footage that the keys on the defendant's person corresponded with the Infiniti. Notably, the recovered firearm was a 40 caliber Glock 22, consistent with the October 3, 2023 recovery of 12 live rounds of 40 caliber ammunition inside a closet in the defendant's residence when a residential warrant was executed there. This factor weighs heavily in favor of pretrial detention, given not only defendant's concerning criminal history and his poor compliance on supervision, but also evidence of his involvement in narcotics trafficking, which, when combined with firearms possession, fuels significant violence in the D.C. community. His violent conduct in the D.C. jail on December 13th and 18th, 2023, only underscores the United States' concern for public safety if this defendant is released. As an initial matter, the defendant's criminal history supports detention. In D.C. Superior Court Case number 2017 CF3449, the defendant was convicted at trial of kidnapping while armed, robbery while armed, and possession of a firearm during a crime of violence. The jury convicted the defendant upon hearing evidence of the following. On December 16, 2016, at approximately 10:25 p.m., the victim was walking in Northeast D.C. when the defendant, joined by two accomplices, accosted the victim and pulled out a firearm, yelling words to the effect of, Go to the fucking alley, you know what this is. The defendant's two accomplices, at the defendant's direction, crowded the victim and walked him into a nearby alley. The defendant then forced the victim to walk with them to 141 35 Street NE, where they ordered the victim to get inside a hole behind a stairwell. The defendant and his accomplices took the victim's cell phone and wallet, including the victim's bank and identification cards. The defendant demanded of the victim his PIN number, threatening to kill him if the victim did not provide that information. Once the victim provided the defendant with the PIN number, the defendant left, and his accomplices continued to hold the victim against his will for an additional 15 minutes. The defendant went to a Bank of America ATM a few blocks from the offense location and attempted to withdraw $1,800. Following a guilty verdict in that matter, the defendant was sentenced on or about October 13, 2017, under the Youth Rehabilitation Act, YRA, to 36 months incarceration, which was suspended except for 12 months, 3 years of supervised release, which was suspended, and 12 months of supervised probation under the YRA. The defendant's probationary period commenced on January 17, 2018, with an expiration date of January 9, 2019. He was placed on maximum supervision, and following his February 28, 2018 arrest, detailed infra, his supervision level was increased to intensive. On March 2, 2018, the Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency, CSOSA, filed an alleged violation report, AVR, in case number 2017 CF3449, identifying numerous technical and criminal violations, including multiple instances of failure to report to community service orientation and the violence reduction program that the defendant had been ordered to attend. Moreover, he had tested positive on at least one occasion when drug tested. Most concerningly, though, was the defendant's February 2018 arrest, a mere month after his probation had commenced. Upon his arrest, the defendant was charged in a new case, D.C. Superior Court case, number 2018 CF2-3475. In this second matter, defendant ultimately pleaded guilty to attempted assault with a dangerous weapon, firearm, and felon in possession of a firearm. His convictions in case number 2018 CF2-3475 stem from his violent conduct on February 28, 2018, at 9:00 a.m. in the morning, when he fired multiple gunshots at a complainant's car as the complainant was driving with a passenger on Blaine Street NE. The defendant, who was standing with two others on a street corner, fired his weapon in broad daylight at the complainant's car and fled towards 37H Place SE, where he was ultimately stopped by officers. On his person at the time of his arrest were 3 large bags of marijuana and 22 oxycodone pills, clearly suggestive of his involvement in narcotics trafficking. In 2018 CF2-3475, the defendant was sentenced on July 25, 2018 to 36 months incarceration and 3 years of supervised release. Given the defendant's rearrest and subsequent guilty plea, the defendant's supervised release in case number 2017 CF3449 was revoked on July 27, 2018 to 36 months incarceration, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He was released from the Bureau of Prisons custody on December 30, 2021, which was when his supervised release in both cases, 2017 CF3449 and 2018 CF2-3475, commenced. The defendant's supervised release in both matters expires on December 30, 2024. This recent arrest marks yet another instance of the defendant violating the conditions of his supervision. What's more, while on supervision in both violent crime matters, the defendant's social media presence shows him blatantly advertising the sale of dangerous narcotics, including fentanyl. Below is a mere sample of the various posts and advertisements that the defendant published on his Instagram account throughout 2023 while on supervision. Notably, the above images implicate the defendant in trafficking of jammers, a colloquialism often referring to counterfeit oxycodone pills containing fentanyl, prescription pills to include oxycodone and Percocets, promethazine, and marijuana. Since his arrest on December 13, 2023, the defendant has remained undeterred in his violent conduct. At approximately 9:30 p.m. on the date of his arrest, the defendant attacked another inmate at the DC jail so severely, the inmate had to be transported to a local hospital for medical intervention to address substantial head injuries. Undaunted, the defendant engaged in another physical assault with a separate inmate on December 18, 2023, which prevented the U.S. Marshals from bringing him to the courthouse for his initial appearance that day. If the defendant is unable to refrain from committing crimes while in a controlled setting at the jail, there is little reason to expect that he will refrain from endangering members of the community if released. Put simply, the defendant's conduct presents a clear danger to public safety, and his history of non-compliance while supervised, detailed supra, portends poor compliance if released to less restrictive conditions in the instant matter. The fourth factor, the nature and seriousness of the danger to any person or the community posed by defendant's release, also weighs in favor of detention. Given that the defendant sped towards the police in a stolen vehicle, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision, and given his possession of a machine gun at the time, the dangerousness that the defendant poses to the community cannot be understated. That he has persisted in possessing weapons designed to kill and maim, despite his prior convictions involving the use of firearms, evinces a level of dangerousness that cannot be mitigated by less restrictive conditions or combinations thereof. See United States v. Gasaway, number 21 Eve 550, 2021, WL 4206616, at 3 DDC Sep 16, 2021. This court agrees with other courts in this district that unlawfully carrying a concealed or loaded firearm in public poses a risk of danger to the public and collecting cases. Moreover, the aforementioned indicia of his consistent involvement in narcotics trafficking, including of fentanyl, underscores the United States' dangerousness concerns. See, e.g., United States versus Nava, number CR 23744, CKK 2023, WL 3158987, at a 5, DDC, April 28, 2023, AFTD subnom, United States vs. Taurus, number 23362, 2023, WL 4489473, DC, Cirrus, July 12, 2023. Conspiring to distribute fentanyl presumptively renders a defendant a serious danger to the community. Indeed, according to the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, fentanyl is a Schedule ill-controlled substance that is similar to morphine, but about 100 times more potent. Because of its potency and low cost, drug dealers have been mixing fentanyl with other drugs including heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine, increasing the likelihood of a fatal interaction. 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal depending on a person's body size, tolerance, and past usage. That the defendant has physically assaulted 2 separate inmates since his arrest last week clearly exhibits for the court the defendant's dangerous behavior. In light of all of the above, the court can have no confidence that the defendant will comply with less restrictive conditions, and that such conditions will assure the safety of the community. That's the end of this episode of DC Profiles. Like, comment, subscribe for more content, and don't forget to follow my Instagram.